intimidation. Oops. With the Bureau of Elections Administrator of Bernalillo County, New Mexico, and member of the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, Nathan Jarramillo. And just a couple housekeeping things. We're recording the session. Stephanie will reach out to you when that is available and how to get it. And if you have questions during the discussion, just pop them into chat, put in all caps questions so I catch it. I'll be recording them all. And after the presentation by Nathan is done, we will get to the questions. So Nathan Jarramillo is the Bureau of Elections Administrator for Bernalillo County, New Mexico. And he is also a member of the recently formed Committee for Safe and Secure Elections. The committee features cross-partisan experts in election administration and law enforcement who aim to support policies and practices that protect election workers and voters from violence, threats, and intimidation. The committee also builds relationships and trust between election officials and law enforcement. The aim is to equip both to prevent and respond to threats and violence against voters and election workers. Nathan will speak to us on conducting and protecting elections in today's difficult times, and also cover what must be done to secure elections going forward while protecting those who administer those elections. He will leave us with action steps we could take to help in this endeavor. So with that, I will stop sharing and kick it over to Nathan.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. It's a pleasure being here this evening. And I just want to say I appreciate everybody's passion and respect to their diligence for voting in elections and overall security and the integrity of the election. That's the whole point of this. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go into my PowerPoint. I'm not sure. You may need to give me access to share on my end.
Oh, well, that's surprising. You should have it because you're a co-host, but possibly you may not. So if you can't, if it's not possible, I guess I can bring up the PowerPoint for you.
Try again.
Or Stephanie, maybe you can, I don't know if there's another, if you have the ability to, I don't see it on my side to enable sharing for Nathan, but.
You know what, I got it.
All right, cool.
All right, thank you guys again. So I'm going to just briefly go over a couple of things we just did. My name is Nathan Jarramillo. Again, I'm the Bureau of Elections Administrator for Bernalillo County. And just to give you a little insight into what Bernalillo County consists of approximately 450,000 registered voters in Bernalillo County. It is the largest county in New Mexico. Now, our vision in Bernalillo County is really being an administration of ethical and secure elections. And you're going to find that in most election-related industry, as they really take pride in ensuring that the integrity of each election is secure. And these are some of our passionate people in our office that really help comprising of our Bureau of Elections. And we want to give credit where credit is due. Bernalillo County Clerk Linda Stover is the elected official who oversees elections within Bernalillo County. So we are permanent county employees that provide that critical infrastructure to ensure that there is no loss of knowledge or retention of legislation, laws, and statutorily mandated requirements for elections. But Linda Stover does a fine job of making sure that everybody is on top of that. And she is very passionate around voting. And she always says that is the greatest weapon that you can ever utilize is your ability to vote. Also, I'm a member, again, for the Safe and Secure Elections Committee. And our goal, as you guys mentioned, is cross-partisan experts sharing their knowledge across all platforms to ensure that the election integrity and efficiency of administering elections is better and better at all times. I'm going to play for you guys a video, and then I'm going to get into this. This is a video of Adams County in Colorado and some of the issues that election officials are facing today.
Top of mind for state lawmakers ahead of the legislative session ending tomorrow. This includes security for the systems we use to vote, as well as for elected officials.
Right, we have an in-depth look at these bills and the work still ahead for lawmakers. So we begin with Denver 7's Patrick Perez and the story of a local clerk of courts protecting himself ahead of midterms. I never thought that it would escalate to this level.
Even as Adams County clerk and reporter Josh Sigelbaum sits in his office and talks with us, he's wearing a bulletproof vest. Did you ever imagine that when you step into this role, these are the type of measures that you would have to take?
No, I didn't. When I left the Marine Corps, I thought that was the last time that I was going to be wearing body armor. And here I'm again.
Sigelbaum says increasing threats following the 2020 presidential election have forced him to improve security at his elections office in Brighton for himself and his staff.
I think the worst one that we've received was somebody telling us that they would see us on the battlefield and they would walk away from it.
Some of these improvements include a remodel, which, when completed, will offer better protection for his employees.
I think January 6th was a good reminder that it can very easily go beyond just words. You repeat a lie enough, people start to believe it. And I think that there's probably a coordinated effort at the very top, and others just eventually felt that it was truth and began to follow.
To combat this, a bill that's currently in the state legislature would prohibit election officials from spreading misinformation or accessing a room of voting equipment without an authorized escort. While this is something Sigelbaum has already implemented, he says the legislation is necessary.
I do know a number of clerks out there who don't necessarily have the best interest of the community in mind.
Sigelbaum is up for re-election this November, and despite the conspiracy theories and threats, he's not backing down.
Do you ever think, you know what, maybe I need to go do something else, this is not worth it? No, there isn't actually another job that I could imagine doing. I absolutely love what I do.
In Brighton, Patrick Perez, number 7.
Top of mind for
So that gives you kind of a taste into the daily life of what election officials have to deal with now on a daily basis. Never would I have imagined that going to work with somebody wearing body armor would be a requirement or something that you have to think about for working in the election industry. And it's something that really hits home, and it should really trouble us to our core about the people that necessarily need to have something like that implemented. And to your left here, you'll see some powerful pictures. One is of Clark County Election Center, of somebody actually going after election officials right there. You see a number of attacks and threats on election officials. They go widespread all across the country, from physically attacking individuals to attacking polling locations, vandalizing them, breaking windows. We've had that circumstance within our own county. There are some counties that even ballot boxes have been lit on fire to destroy the ballots that were inside of those things. And then also cybersecurity and now mis and disinformation online that affects overall people's perception on elections and the security of them. All of those things are forms of attacks that election officials have to deal with on a daily basis and have to contend and combat with. And those are all of the things that we want to make you aware of today, because we want to answer that question of what can I do to be a positive impact into this? What can I do to combat some of this negativity surrounding elections that we have to contend with? So I want to get into first, identifying the major overall threats facing elections in our country. What we know about our adversaries and what would they do to undermine democracy in this country. So the first thing that we deal with and we identify is local and community actors or activists. Those are people that are actively going out there and trying to disrupt the community, disrupt the area that you reside in, and let people know, hey, this is something that is not going right in the election. This is something that is negative, or this is a lie that they're trying to do to disrupt an election, and all those people that are involved within that community. And that causes doubt and seeds people, maybe disenfranchisement of voters wanting to go out there and cast their vote, maybe people that are confused on which way they should vote. Those local community actors or activists are usually there to disrupt the overall process and efficiency of elections, and then also undermines ultimately the perception of the election community. Another aspect of a threat would be a cyber criminal. We have those that would do ransomware, phishing, etc. And those cyber criminals are usually in it for money. They're trying to make a profit on it. They understand the highly polarizing and politicized nature of elections these days. And they feel like if I can take advantage of maybe a database or maybe some sort of private data that I can get a hold of, or totally undermine the ability for an administration to actually bring an election about, then I can actually profit off of this. We actually had an example of something like this within our own Bernalillo County. Now, it wasn't pertaining specifically to elections, but if it happened during election season, it would definitely undermine our ability to efficiently conduct an election. The ransomware attacked the entire county through a Bitcoin wallet, and it basically put us to our knees where they said, leave your laptops where they were at, go home, and we'll call you when you can come back to work. And we all know elections don't work on a time clock like that. They have a specific deadline that we're statutorily mandated to complete. And that's something that we have to take into account and totally bolster up our election infrastructure and security to ensure something like that wouldn't transpire here or any other county for that matter, or community. Another a threat facing our elections is a state actor. Now, this is somebody who's acting on behalf of a governmental body, somebody that's going in there to actually sow discord, either on the back end, they're trying to get into a database, getting into your secured network, getting into there, and maybe not even doing something right away, but they might be laying low and just doing some fact finding, some gathering, some data mining, and then at some point they'll take it to have a final blow to affect your election. And they want to also undermine the overall perception of elections as well. Another threat is a hacktivist. Now, at least that's what we like to eloquently call them. Those are people that really spread myths, dis, and malinformation online, whether it's through your social programs such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or just somebody who's on underground chat rooms and spreading discord among those people and really getting people fired up or impassioned to really go after either an elected official, an election organization as and all, or the elections office to undermine the election. And those are people that really want to negatively sow discord as well. Now, the final threat that we really need to look into in our office is insider threats. And what I mean by that is during an election season, the number of staff within our office grows exponentially. We have to hire on any given election over 100 temporary employees and approximately 1,200 poll officials or election workers. And that we give them information to help conduct the election that may be considered private or secure on a need-to-know basis. So we have to do our due diligence of vetting these people, keeping an eye on them, and ensuring we're only giving certain levels of access to those that are need to know. And those are all the threats that really face our community, and how we can really combat that is what we're going to discuss today. I want to give you a little bit of data here, and some of this may shock you. This is based on the 2022 primary election, and this is a breakdown of election-related threats from the FBI. This is the data that was sent over to me from them. So the first graph you see to your left is the communication platforms of where those threats are coming from. As you can see, majority of them are coming via email into the offices. Some are coming via telephone. Social media is equivalent to the telephone. In person is a smaller percentage, and also mail itself, which is a physical mail. And then onto your right, you'll see a breakdown of the actors of where they're coming from. So election workers that are local to the state level are equivalent in 48%. And then the vendors is a smaller number. That would be like those that are assisting in setting up check-in stations or ballot on demand stations, whatever you call them at the sites, or working with the technology or the software involved in elections. Something that I want to really hit home to you is based on this data, this is based on over 1,000 threats that went into the FBI during the 2022 primary timeframe. Out of those 1,000 threats, the FBI identified approximately 11% as being verifiable and something that needs to be investigated or potentially prosecuted. Now, it doesn't seem like a small number, or it doesn't seem like a large number, but it's over 100 verifiable threats that somebody really wanted to follow through on. And that's a scary notion to think that somebody is willing to go to that level to attack, harm, or threaten an elected official. In that regard, I know personally of some emails that have come to my office, to me, essentially saying, turn yourself in, or we're going to citizen arrest you. I've had an individual come to my house, knocking on the door and asking if this is the Nathan Jarramillo that administers elections. We've had somebody email us or email the clerk or all of the county commission saying, do not certify the election. If you do, we're going to take you down, or you've been warned, you're going to go down for this. Those are things that cause anxiety and apprehension to really move forward successfully. And talking to a lot of elected officials that I deal with, they say they second guess and question a lot of the decisions that they're going to make because they don't want to have that myriad of issues coming into contact from all these threats, telephone, email, or overwhelming, even just their Inspection of Public Records Act, where there people are requesting those certain documents, and they flood those things to really affect our ability to perform efficiently as well. We've also had plenty of voicemails coming in saying, you know, we know what you're doing to win the election for one person or another. We're keeping an eye on you, and as soon as you make a misstep, we're taking you down. Another colleague of mine that I recently in a conference that I was in showed me a picture of something that they identified in a chat room, and it had a picture of his face with a bullseye or a scope, a sniper scope around his face. Right next to that was a picture of his house, and then below that was his actual address. And he said the scary thing is that front window right there is where my 7-year-old daughter sleeps at night. Now, that's something that should really disgust and shame most individuals to be putting to that level. But really, a lot of people have fell to a lot of the ploys that are out there to really get that impassioned. And it's wrong, but to attack people to that level, thinking that they're going to change an outcome of something that's already been done and finalized. These are possible repercussions of those negative impacts and threats. So disenfranchisement of voters. That's the first thing that I hear is people saying, I don't really want to vote anymore. My vote's not going to count anyways. It was thrown away. Somebody shredded it anyways because I voted for the guy who didn't win. Or, you know what, all this fighting and everything, I just don't want to deal with it anymore. Another thing is a loss of public trust and overall perception. It's been compromised. It's been compromised to the level of people asking, you know, is it true that this particular tabulator can flip votes? Is it true that this particular software will only allow certain party affiliations to cast their vote officially? I noticed on some of the data sets that I've seen online, and all this mal and disinformation has changed the whole outcome of an election. And that affects our democracy. The fundamental foundation of our democracy and elections is trust in the system. And when you try to erode that particular foundation, that really affects our ability to efficiently administer an election and also create stumbling blocks for people that want to vote now, in the future, and also for other generations of all this mistrust in our system. And another thing we got to look at is reallocation of resources. And what I mean by that is all of our offices and elected officials have been flooded with a lot of requests, templated requests on asking for things that just really take a lot of time, busy work to pull out documents. Even from the 2020 election still, we had somebody come into our office personally, and they brought about 40 individuals to comb over all of our ballot tapes, which actually presents the results of the tapes, and recorded all of them. And we had to be there, at least 5 or 6 of our staff, for at least 4 or 5 hours for them to do that in accordance with the Inspection of Public Records Act that allowed for that. But that takes up time and resources we can allocate on focusing on the current upcoming 2022 general election and making that as efficient, safe, and secure as possible. Another thing that is a possible repercussion, and I've seen it in local counties, and I'm sure it expands beyond to all states and election officials, is the loss of subject matter experts in this field. A lot of people, like I mentioned, the gentleman who's been threatened personally with his house, are so anxiety ridden, don't want to deal with this particular threat anymore. They've been dealing with this for the last couple of years with that, and in the midst of a pandemic, it's difficult for somebody to say, you know what, I'm going to stick through it. A lot of people are saying it's just enough for me. They polled over 600 individuals that work in the poll official field or the election field and work with poll officials directly, and they said they've known or they know of somebody who said that they've been threatened individually, and it's really difficult to continue working in that industry when you're constantly getting that threatening behavior, and that loss of subject matter experts is a retention of knowledge that is pivotal to the success of all elections. It's pivotal to have those people who are intimately knowledgeable of all the intricacies of an election, of all the aspects of it, of all the processes, of all of the statutorily mandated timelines, of all the obligations of legislation that are incumbent upon our offices to achieve a successful election. When you lose those people, it's hard to then have new people coming in and learn on the fly to continually administer a successful election. And those are things that negatively impact an outcome of a public perception of an outcome of an election. I want to play something for you that really hits home. It's another powerful piece. So if you could bear with me for a second, and there's still warning, it does have some suggestive language there.
He will demand the truth, and you will pay for your lying remarks, liberal lying rhinos. We will take you out, your family, your life. Watch your back.
They had assault rifles.
Pipe bomb.
You're gonna get what's coming to you.
It said my life didn't go anywhere without the police officers.
We had officers on the roof of our building. We had go bags ready for my family and my children.
We recognized that the divisiveness in our country was really growing. We also recognized the role that social media was playing.
I had never ever had that before. I'd never had people so engaged and enraged about what we were doing just to ensure that people could vote.
There were people who showed up outside of election officials' houses, armed, people that showed up outside of offices, threatening phone calls, harassment.
And online discussions about types of ammunition and guns.
It became a daily occurrence outside of our facility to have anywhere from 50 to 150 individuals outside. Some of them were armed. There was a fence sort of separating the building from the protesters, and they were armed.
We were terribly concerned about every threat, everything that was said, because we just didn't know. I was encountered with a partisan operative campaign manager with his cell phone, where he videotaped me hurling insults and accusations. It had over 400,000 views. Commenters were saying you should find out where she lives, you should hang her for treason, she should be shot. This is not what I expect to have to really run and fight for my life.
My son began getting threats that were intended for me.
They're leaving their families and their loved ones to come into a job that was supposed to be just to count votes or to administer an election. You actually had a record number of turnouts of people that came out in a pandemic.
Everything that you had written in a playbook as far as like how you normally do things in an election cycle had to be set aside.
And let's pause and say, This is really what I want to do.
This to me was an effort to undermine confidence in our entire electoral process. We think about that happening in other places around the world, but that's happened in the United States, and it's happened specifically because of the big lie.
Election officials are in this for passion, for service.
The public servants all around this country that run our elections at the state and local level, they don't do this job to get rich, and they care more about the integrity of elections than anyone I know.
Again, that's powerful imagery there, and the words of those elected officials being constantly harassed and threatened is difficult for me to watch because it affects me personally. Like they mentioned in the video, most of these people are passionate about elections and the integrity of elections and the democracy it brings to the communities. And for them to be threatened on a daily or consistent basis undermines their ability to successfully do their job. And they do this for the communities that they embody. What I want to identify next is what is the Bureau of Elections doing to protect from these type of threats? So what is people in the election industry doing? Well, number one, to know and understand the vulnerabilities within our offices and reinforce them. One can be from a cyber aspect. We do things to make sure that that is secure. Another from a physical aspect. Personally, what me and my staff do is we look at the physical security of our offices, of our voting locations that we have within our county. We also coordinate in conjunction with local sheriffs, deputies, and also National Guard if necessary, and state police force to rapidly deploy if necessary. And we have a chain of command on those particular deployment to ensure that everything is secure in that aspect. Another side of it is when we have the election night reporting, we have a whole SWAT team plan, if necessary, to evacuate and extricate the individuals that need to be able to continually administer the election and report the results in a swift and proper manner. Another thing is network and learn from our peers in the election community. It's important for us to talk amongst each other, learn what somebody else is doing to continue to bolster up and fight against these type of attacks. And then the next thing is we learn all those things and we employ them and we educate our teams on the best practices and processes to dictate how we're moving forward in the elections. We enhance our security leadership network. We bring in people to evaluate and see where we have holes or deficits to continually and constantly become more secure and safe for our elected officials, for our poll workers, and for the community as a whole, for people that even go to cast the vote. We take all of that into consideration. Another thing that we do is what we've been doing now, especially since 2020 and beyond, is we're accelerating our physical and cybersecurity readiness. We're ensuring that we're ready to go well in advance of every election, that we have a well set out process and workflow of how all of these things will take into account, and we're aware of a lot of different things that can go wrong, and we're prepared for those things, because it's better to be prepared and not need physical and cybersecurity checks and then not have them and not be able to use them in advance. Those are things that we've done with tabletop exercises. We've done with actual role playing, mock testing, and we went as far as even physically going and securing all of our warehouses with new technology of changing out keys, making sure that we have key card access to only people on need-to-know basis. We have third-party authentication factors for people within our office. And all those things are done just to ensure that that integrity of the election is secure. We can speak confidently to all those out there that have questions about that, but also that we feel confident that we're protected as well from those outside threats. Now, the question that you guys have been asking, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today, is what can I do to combat the perils of election threats? What can I do as a community actor? Well, the first thing is to identify where there are problems, identify in your community where you see that there are some things that may not look right, things that maybe seem off, that maybe something that you say, you know, this is something that potentially could be a danger to our elected officials or the election integrity as a whole. This is a quote from somebody. Unfortunately, it was at a conference and I wrote it down because it really rang home to me and it resonated with me, but I don't remember the individual's name and I apologize. But he said, prevention is ideal, detection is a must. So we have to be able to detect any issues in order to be able to resolve them. So we can use the community's help and getting out there and identifying where all those deficits are, where our security is at, where the threats are actually coming from, whether it be in chat rooms, social media, physically in the community at events or organizations or groups that are sowing discord. You as an individual can identify those things and report them to a lot of different people that are ready and willing to investigate those and help resolve those type of issues. Another thing is stay connected with the election community, the people that are working in the election field within your community. And you want to ask yourself, am I engaged with that leadership? Am I talking to the elected officials? Am I talking to the administration? Am I seeing what they need from us as a community to benefit elections and their democracy? Am I contributing to the movement? It's one thing to know and identify those issues, but then to physically go out there and apply them to the movement is needed. For those, we need those frontline people to help as poll officials, because with all of the pandemic and all the threats, we had a lot of people who just did not flat out want to work elections anymore. I talked about the retention of subject matter experts. In addition to that, retention of really good and engaged poll officials ready to work each election. On any given election, we need anywhere from 800 to 1,200 poll officials. And that's the key to making sure an election is secure, as well as having those individuals ready and willing to go out there and offer their services. And any other way you can help, we're always willing to accept a helping hand. The next thing is, am I saying no or no? What I mean by that is, am I somebody who's saying no to all the negative comments out there that are online? Am I saying no, the election officials aren't doing this right? Or no, I'm bringing a negative light to this? Or am I actually taking the time to really know and understand the processes, the statutes, the legislation that takes into account all of these election individuals and how they're applying them? And I can help further educate other people on these aspects so that it doesn't sow discord or dissension or some sort of divide between what's going on. A lot of times I find when we have challengers or watchers or people that are concerned citizens in the community, if they really took the time and when we explain to them all of the things and why we do them in elections, they leave feeling a lot more comfortable with the security of the election. And when we have somebody like that, it makes us feel really good that we have more trust built back into elections. The next thing is, am I being proactive? And you guys already are doing that. So kudos for all of you. You guys are taking that proactive approach of listening to speakers, educating yourselves, really contributing to the movement. So I know I'm preaching to the choir and all of these things, but what you're doing now is the start that's going to get us there to being protected of all these elected officials from threats, from overall security for an election. And then am I focusing on the right things? If you understand and you're engaged with the leadership, you're contributing to the movement, and you're knowing to educate yourself and you're being proactive, you will be, I guarantee it, focusing on those right things. And you're leading people to the right conclusion of, yes, our elections are secure. Yes, our election officials are being passionate and diligent around elections. And they're just individuals just like you who want to do their job and do it well. And then educate and train the community and the groups and the organizations. Maybe the people that missed this webinar, maybe other people within your own family and community. I know my own family, when they see elections, they think, you know, all the ballots just kind of go into one big bin, and then a big light blings on the scoreboard and tells you how many votes they have. They're not aware of all the processes and all of the things that we put in place to ensure that everything is done correctly and well. And then also educate them on the negative things that the election officials have to deal with on a daily basis. And then obviously report any issues that you identified. Make sure that you've identified those things and then report them to the proper authorities, whether it be the Attorney General's office, the FBI, Homeland Security, or even your local election office. If you give that intel to them, they'll report it up. And we have mechanisms in place to report all of that. And we work in conjunction with these particular organizations, to governmental bodies, to ensure that everybody is safe and secure. And then tell your story. Combat mis, dis, and malinformation yourself. If you've had a pleasant and positive experience voting or working as an election official or working as an election worker or poll official, please let other people know in the community. Combat that negative aspect that's out there online. All of the things that are there saying ballots are being shredded behind closed doors. I had one vote go this way, and next thing you know, my vote flipped for the other people. Say, I'm educated. I know that that's not possible, and here's the reasons why, based on the factual argument. Fact finding is really key and clear. That necessitates what we need to do to combat all this mis, and disinformation. Really, at the end of the day, I want to talk about hopes for tomorrow. We know how highly politicized and polarizing the last couple of years have been in elections. And one thing that I can say is it did bring a spotlight to elections. It brought a focal point to where the needs are. And hopefully, and just like with the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, people will collaborate and strengthen relationships between election officials, law enforcement, and the communities that they reside in, so that we can have a positive outlook on elections to encourage more people to go vote and turn out. An increased focus on legislation is needed to protect the people who participate in elections, to the election process from intimidation and violence. I've seen legislation that's been presented from a federal and local level, and I'm proud to say that some of that has passed. Some of it still needs a long way to go to protect these people from doing their job that they want to do to make it a great community and democracy for everybody. Overall election participation, like I mentioned before, that is the greatest gift that we have in respect to democracy, is being able to exercise our right to vote on what we like and what we don't like, to have our voice heard, to be able to sit at the table and say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. It may not necessarily turn out the way we intended or wanted it to be, but if we've exercised our right to vote, we have our ability to say, I have the right to exercise my freedom, and I've done that and conducted it in a successful manner. And that's what I hope everybody within all of our communities is able to do, is we grow and expand on that, and we exercise our rights to say, this is what I want. No, this is what I don't want. That's a powerful weapon that we can utilize, and people need to hopefully grow and understand that, and it will increase in the future. Well, guys, that's my presentation. I appreciate you taking the time to sit here and listen to what I had to say. There's my information there if you wanted to contact me or email me directly. In addition to that, here's some key websites that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. SafeElections.org, which is the committee that we are on to collaborate and help that elections integrity be secure. In addition, there's also the website from our local county, Bernalillo, and also our email here and some phone numbers. So I'll now stand for some questions, and thank you very much for all of your time and consideration today and giving me this opportunity to present to you today.
All right, thank you very much. Let's jump right into questions. So the first question comes from Tony Feinberg. Is there any thought of two items? First, enforcing laws against threats against public officials and their families. Much more could be done to find anonymous criminals making such threats on the internet. I'll just stop with that part one of the question, and ask part two, which is about jail penalties. In fact, I'll just post it in the chat in case you want to read it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of thought, and we actually have lobbyists within our own state that try to really impose stricter penalties on people that are threatening in the way I presented here. Unfortunately, here in New Mexico, the legislation that was supposed to be taken into account to increase those penalties failed. And similarly, it failed in a lot of other states. That really undermines the ability for certain offices to go after individuals. It does minimize penalties on what they can get away with, what is considered a threat and what it's not. There are certain languages. So for example, we had a county commissioner who felt unsafe when certifying the results of the election in the 22 primary because she received an email from an individual saying, I'm warning you, if you certify this election, you know, we're going to take you out. And when brought to Attorney General's office, you know, they said, well, that could be looked at in a lot of different ways. It can be take you out of office. It could be we can vote to vote you out of office next election. And they said they're warning here, but there was nothing specific in respect to a threat that we can actually escalate this to be doing anything from a prosecutorial standard. And that's something that has to be looked at. I'm not sure what can be done with that, but it's definitely something that we've highlighted and focused on the elected officials that get threatened. But even if they're loose or veiled threats, it still puts people in an uneasy feeling about what can be done to protect them.
So the second part of that question was, I think you might have addressed it, but I'll ask it anyway. Should we increase jail penalties for such behavior, like 10 to 20 plus enforcement could be a good deterrent? In case you didn't address it, I'll just ask it.
Yeah. And my opinion is it depends on the situation, right? The escalation of an increased sentence depends on the type of threat, what is actually done physically or online. But I think there definitely needs to be a look at it and a reevaluation on a protection level of protection for these officials and the ability to administer election. Like I mentioned earlier, it is a fundamental part of our foundation of our democracy is elections. And when you start threatening these individuals to the point of them not even wanting to work in elections or consider if this is something for them, you know, that undermines or erodes a foundation that ultimately affects us as a nation. So I definitely think it needs to get reevaluated and readdressed on what needs to be done to maybe look at severe penalties if necessary.
So this next question I will also post in the chat, and it comes from Jed Pauker. The question is, on August 3rd, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee held its first hearing on threats to election workers. They received testimony from an array of professionals and election officials for official public assessment of circumstances and consideration of relevant legislation going forward. Are you aware of any federal, state, or local level outreach being done by current elected officials or public servants to collect and catalog the range and quantity of threats that you're receiving or counting?
That is a good question. And from a federal level, I am not aware. From a local level, a state level, I am aware of people that have cataloged those type of threats. I've actually met with individuals from the Department of Homeland Security. And essentially what they said is the reports report anything and everything, even if it seems like it's a small threat on our end. It's something that's important for them from cataloging purposes. So what they try to do, and I'll equate this similar to like a quarterback, right? We'll send up threats from different states or different communities, different counties to one particular group. And that they have an individual who's like a quarterback, and he'll look and he'll say, okay, this is something that seems to be coming from a lot of different states, and it's a similar type of threat. Maybe there's one organization or one entity that's really making this prevalent or pushing this agenda. I'm going to go ahead and send this particular thing to be looked at and evaluated even more stringently than just in one level. And that's why it's really important that we actually do exercise that opportunity to report, because even though it seems like it's a small isolated incident here in one county or community, it may be going on throughout the country from one organization or group or of malfeasance to disrupt elections. So it's important to centralize that so they can identify where it's coming from and how to prevent it or stop it ultimately.
Okay, this next question, which I will also post to the chat, comes from Alan. And the question is, what are your thoughts on the amount of election deniers being elected to state office, such as secretaries of state?
My thoughts on it is that ultimately does undermine the workers that are the frontline workers actually getting these elections done and completed. And it's discouraging to see people that will deny the election because I know on the back end, and most election officials know on the back end, all of the hard work, dedication, security, into security and integrity of an election that we take into account before we even present those results out. In fact, we work in preparation for the primary. We work as soon as November was over, we start working in December to prep for that election. As soon as the primary is over in June 2022, in New Mexico at least, we begin preparing for the November general election here. And all of the team works around the clock to get that done and completed. So it's discouraging to see higher elected officials dissuading people into believing that our integrity of our elections are secure, because I would really encourage them to take the time to get familiar with their local clerks, with their local registrars, with their local individuals that actually will be implementing these procedures in place, and acknowledge that there aren't very many deficits. And if there are, let's find a way to bolster that particular deficit instead of just outright denying without any plausible evidence or facts to back that up.
The next question is a logistical one from Joan. Is the PowerPoint available to educate local groups?
Absolutely. I gave this out already. I sent this over to your organization. So if you're wanting to share it, please feel free to do that. I'm open to disseminating any of this information to get that out there. It's nothing that's proprietary or secure and in effect to the election, but this information that I provided here for you today, it could be beneficial for anybody that wants to hear it.
All right. And the last question comes from Al Franklin. I'm posting it in the chat. Oh, we have one additional question after that. I think what Al is asking, how do you reassure to recruit and retain volunteer poll workers is, I guess, how do you reassure potential volunteers and existing volunteers to make sure that you can recruit them and ultimately retain them?
So that's a good point. And that's a good question. So in the 2020 general, we had a database of 3,000 people that expressed interest or willingness to work as a poll official in the election. Nearly 70% of those individuals, when we contacted them, did not want to work the election, whether it be because of the COVID pandemic or because of the nature of the election at that time and the threatening behavior of individuals that actually went to sites and threatened our poll officials. One thing that we've done in Bernalillo County, and the clerk has done a great job in this, and she's been a big proponent of that, is to increase the level of pay. Now, we understand that most of these individuals are doing it essentially for a volunteer basis because they're passionate about elections. But we also want to thank them on our end for what they do and do what we can from a level of pay. The other thing is we try to make it a positive working environment. We really make it user-friendly for the manuals to support them, the training that we bring them into to make sure that they're fully well-versed. We have a whole mock simulation training facility where they can train on how it's going to be at the polling locations. And the second thing is we provide support to them. What we have in Bernalillo County is a dedicated hotline where a number, and only the poll officials have that, they can call into this dedicated hotline comprised of about 15 to 20 people. They can actually ask any question there at the polling site, and we can help them navigate through what they need to do from a statutorily mandated position or just a process or logistic question. Another aspect that we do is we provide what are called troubleshooter support. If we can't just help them out over the phone, we will deploy a troubleshooter, and they're already strategically placed throughout our community to go into those individual sites and help them on a personal basis. Because we want to make them feel comfortable and thank them for what they do. We really could not do what we do without those frontline workers, those poll officials, to make it a successful election. And again, I want to keep imploring that the clerk is a huge proponent of that within our community. So it starts with the elected official in those communities to really be acknowledging of those poll officials and what they do and what they bring to elections, and then being able to show that gratitude and thankful in different ways. Again, money is great, but most of them don't do it for that. They're looking at it because they want to do a good deed. And we want to thank them and have all the support we can to let them know we're in this together, we're a team. In order to be successful, we're going to do everything we can to make you successful.
And we have a final question perhaps from Jed Palker. Would your election management community benefit more from state or federal legislation?
Well, we know federal legislation will supersede state law. So it is difficult to accomplish that feat, though. So, the answer to that is both. We will utilize federal legislation if it benefited us and the security of elected officials, and we'll benefit from a state legislation. So from a local level, we push it to the state legislation, and we'll use collaboration of community groups to help bring it to a federal level as well. All in all, the goal is the same, and it's to secure elections and secure the election officials to make sure they're protected as well. So I don't have an answer to say which one's better over the other, but I prefer both of them to be pushed towards a positive agenda.
Well, that wraps up the questions. Nathan, did you have any final thoughts before we pass it off to Stephanie?
Again, I just want to thank you guys for your passion and diligence around elections. That encourages me, and it lifts my spirits to know that there's people that really want to look out for the benefit of elected officials, of the election entirely. And I actually want to thank you and give you my gratitude for everything you guys do for inevitably this country. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, on that note, passing it on to Stephanie.
First, I want to give a huge, a huge thank you to you, Nathan, for speaking with us this evening. Excuse me. It was wonderful. I have one question of my own that somehow I couldn't manage to get into the chat this evening. If you have just one more minute to explain to us what the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections, I know, well, explain because I know who's on it, but if you could explain a bit about the background of that committee and what your goals are.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen too, and I'm going to go back to that mission statement that I provided in the beginning. So let me. So the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections features cross-partisan experts in election administration and law enforcement who aim to support policies and practices that protect election workers and voters from violence, threats, and intimidation. The committee also works to build relationships and trust between elected officials and law enforcement to better equip both to prevent and respond to threats and violence against voters and election workers. Now, I took that directly off from the webpage because that's very succinct and to the point of our goal. We are really taking a lot of educated minds that are very diligent and passionate around elections, and also in law enforcement that have minds on what we can do, that we're not looking at it from the aspect of a law enforcement background, to make sure that we're bolstering up elections as a whole, and we're collaborating to find policies and practices that benefit each community, each state, and also federal legislation to help change that and highlight the awareness and the necessity for these kind of things. So the group is a great group of many members of educated individuals with many years of experience either in law enforcement or the election industry to really provide the greatest examples and have the ability to come and speak to people like yourselves and ensure that we're doing everything we can to bolster up and protect from threats and violence from election workers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this evening. We really appreciate your being here. Just a note to everyone, in case you didn't hear when John said it, everyone will get a link to the recording of tonight's presentation, as well as a link to the PowerPoint. And as Nathan said, you may use it as you see fit. So I want to thank everyone for their attendance this evening and their attention. And it was great. Everybody have a wonderful Wednesday evening. Night.
Everyone, you do as well.
Did you stop the recording?
I'm working on it. Oh, shoot.
All right.
Okay, here we go.
Sorry.
Where is record? Why can't I? Okay, I guess I have to go back up here. Oh, here we go.